It said that bad things come in threes. Well, we know one car company that ain't buying that. That's this week on Motoring 2001.
TSN's Motoring 2001 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
Well, last week we were in Moosonee on the shores of Hudson Bay, and it was cold and it was snowy. This week we're in Quebec's eastern townships, and once again, believe me, it's cold out here, and as you can see, we've got lots of snow. Now that's okay in January and February, but hey, they told me that spring sprung weeks ago. Now, has this not been the longest winter we've ever endured? All right, enough whining. We are Canadian. But the reason we're here and we're at the San Air racetrack is to check out 3 brand new sport utilities from General Motors. Now, as you know, over the years, this company has been criticized because a lot of their product looks the same. And that was true at one time, but I think it began to change with the introduction of the Aurora years ago. And as for these 3 new vehicles, well, as one GM executive said at yesterday's news conference, these trucks are gonna kick ass.
This is big news. We're pretty excited about bringing 3 all-new sport utility vehicles to the market. The all-new Chevy Trailblazer, GMC Envoy, and Oldsmobile Bravada. We're excited because they're aimed right at the heart of the compact SUV market, and they're all new from the bottom up. Each one has its own unique styling and brand character. We think that consumers will have 3 great entries to choose from that will bring out a real positive emotional response. And what we've tried to do when in the design studio is bring out the different brand characters. Certainly the Chevy Trailblazer leverages the strong appeal of the Chevy truck look and heritage. GMC is looking very refined and premium. And the Oldsmobile Bravada was designed to be at home in an Oldsmobile garage.
Well, we did a brand new engine for this vehicle. It's actually for all 3 vehicles, the inline 6. It's a Vortec 4200. It's 4.2 liters in displacement. It's all aluminum, dual rod cam, variable valve timing. A lot of technology that delivers lots of performance and good fuel economy. This engine replaces the 4.3 liter V6 that's currently used in the Blazer and the Jimmy. That engine produces around 200 horsepower. This new engine is a 4.2 liter in displacement, delivers 270 horsepower, which is at least 40 more horsepower than any of our nearest competitors' V8s or V6s in this midsize SUV segment.
Well, at first I was a bit shocked because everybody's moving away from inline 6s with the exception of BMW, but in a passenger car you've got real estate constraints. In this particular application where you've got a couple of acres under the hood, the inline 6 is very good, and this one's particularly good. 270 horse, 275 pounds-feet of torque, 90% of which starts coming in at 1600 RPM. It's a very, very nice engine, very sweet.
We got a lot of wheel spin there. The road was a bit wet. Now we're on our way. It's a very sporty engine, the new inline 6 from General Motors. And we're going through the traps about 130K. I really like the engine. It's very smooth, very sporty, very responsive. It's a quiet vehicle. It's a good combination vehicle for, as I say, everyday use, and you can also go off-road. The only immediate drawback I see is the lack of the third rear seat, but I understand that they will be bringing a longer vehicle out in the future with a third row seat.
they've done here, I think, Brett, is they've delivered 3 vehicles, probably for the first time. They've delivered 3 vehicles built from the same platform that don't strike you as vehicles built from the same platform when you drive them, when you look at them. They have distinct differences between the Chevrolet version, the GMC version, the Oldsmobile version, and what they've mentioned, and I really believe they're right, that people are going to develop an affinity for one of the 3 and say, hey, that's my choice and that's the one that works for me.
Yeah, well, this is one of our first applications of a full frame, the hydroformed frame. And hydroforming is a new technology that was introduced with the Corvette, and then we started applying it to other products like Grand Am and Alero and the engine cradle. Were good applications for hydroforming. And if you're not familiar with hydroforming, it's almost similar to blowing up a balloon inside of a pop bottle. You take the steel tube, inject high pressure fluid into the tube, which is encased with a tool, and then the pressure actually forces the steel into the shape of the tool, and you get the product. So what it does is eliminates a lot of welding, a lot of extra metal. It saves weight. It's a stronger, stiffer frame. Bending strength in this vehicle is on par with most sports cars in the market today.
And it's got to spell the end of Jimmy and Blazer, I would think.
Well, it already has in the U.S. Jimmy and Blazer are done down there. We'll see them here in Canada probably for another 2 years.
Competition for these vehicles are other like-sized vehicles such as the new Ford Explorer or the Jeep Grand Cherokee, or some of the import entries like Pathfinder or 4Runner.
What's this going to do? I think it's a great heads up, and it's going to see more real top quality and diversified product come from all the manufacturers. First person that shows up at the dance with the platform shoes, everybody's got them next week.
About 80% of those drivers are breaking the law, and I'm not talking about speeding. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
The all-wheel drive system, 227 horsepower and rightful.
Okay. Hit that spot, buddy.
For the past few years, Subaru have been criticised for having, well, to be polite, mediocre horsepower, and that was primarily because of the demise of all of their turbocharged models. Well, this week on Test Drive, we celebrate the return of the turbo as we take a look at the all-new Impreza WRX. The WRX comes to market to celebrate Subaru's considerable success in the World Rally Championship, and while it lacks the all-out blow of the real thing, the WRX is destined to become somewhat of a legend. The secret lies in the power found beneath the hood, a competition-bred 2-litre twin-cam flat 4 that develops 227 horsepower and 217 pounds-feet of torque at just 4,000 RPM. So how do Subaru get 227 horsepower out of this engine? The answer is simple. This hood scoop is functional. All of the air that cascades through here goes straight through this air-to-air intercooler. Now that device allows them to crank up the boost pressure without detonating the engine to death. The result is a very quick car. While both manual and automatic versions of the WRX are offered, the only road to take is the 5-speed do-it-yourselfer. This box brings nicely spaced ratios and a light progressive clutch. It also maximises the engine's sweetness, allowing the driver to do some very serious driving. The Rally Racer theme continues inside the WRX, where you get a very nice set of heavily bolstered seats that are heated and very comfortable. You get power locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, a very nice set of instruments, and a centre stack that's got this sort of racy looking aluminum finish. That houses a great sounding radio and easy to use rotary controls. You also get a Momo steering wheel, which sort of adds to the racing thing again. The one thing that's missing is a boost gauge. It really would be very nice to know when the turbo is truly cooking. A fully independent McPherson strut suspension and the world's best all-wheel drive system lay the power to the ground in a very convincing fashion. Body roll and understeer are well out, and when either encroaches, it's easily controlled. Balance only begins to describe the handling prowess. The lone downfall is that the ride verges on being harsh, at least in an everyday driving situation. While the WRX does suffer from initial turbo lag, once you hit about 3,000 RPM, it really does fly. And the manual gearbox, well, that's what masks it best of all. With the automatic, it seems to be a little more sluggish until you're really moving. Get to highway speeds, breathe on the gas pedal, and hello, baby. On the safety front, the WRX brings dual front airbags, side impact bags, and a proper 4-channel, 4-sensor anti-lock brake system. Dropping the anchor from 80k produces short, straight stops that measure a commendable 112 feet. You know, this WRX is beautifully balanced. The all-wheel drive, 227 horsepower, and the road manners combine to make it a blast to tear up your favourite bit of blacktop or deal with inclement weather. Perhaps the only thing to lament, priced at $34,995 for the base car, this car is going to be beyond the budgetary means of most of the people that would truly appreciate it.
This vehicle is very feasible. We like it. We want it made. People will aspire to own this kind of car, practically speaking, young professionals, people who enjoy the pure pleasure of driving. Interior, it kind of speaks for itself, but totally open air, inspired by the feel of a cafe, sitting around just chatting with friends, and yet you're in a high-performance car. The most fascinating feature here for me is the side air intake. I mean, this is something that looks a lot different from any other mid-engine where you typically just have a hole punched in the body side. Here we actually fused it with the rear wheel well. Big aerodynamic advantage because we're sucking in all that dirty air from the wheel, using it to cool the engine. We worked on it for about 6 months, blood, sweat, and tears. If anything, we just want to capture people's imagination, ask them to ask our bosses to make it.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns chassis lubrication, otherwise known as a grease job. Typically something you want to do every time you change the oil and filters in the vehicle. Now, depending on what type of vehicle you have, this operation could vary from the lightweight front-wheel drive vehicle that has no grease fittings under the chassis to the sport utility van, pickup, or four-wheel drive vehicle that's literally bristling with grease fittings. In any case, it's important that they get greased at the proper intervals if it does have fittings and that you use the correct lubricant. The grease does a number of things. Obviously prevents these expensive suspension and steering components from wearing out. It also drives moisture out of these joints and prevents moisture from infiltrating some of the small crevices between some of these joints that are not all that well sealed. The grease literally gets in there and smucks these two together and prevents water from getting in there. Now, if you've replaced components in your vehicle, you may have picked up or acquired some more grease fittings than it actually came from the factory with. For example, that front-wheel drive lightweight vehicle may now have grease fittings in ball joints or tie rods if they've been replaced. And the same on a light truck. You may have fittings in the drive shaft in the universal joints that you didn't have from the factory. If that's the case on your vehicle, when you change those components, make sure that you make service personnel aware there may be grease fittings where there weren't previously. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Oldsmobile dealerships all over the country. Your Oldsmobile dealer is ready for spring.
Baby boomers don't know what an Oldsmobile is or what we stand for, and very few of them even know what our heritage is about.
Despite John Rock's optimism and despite terrific product, Oldsmobile sales continue to slide. And last year, General Motors finally pulled the plug on the oldest nameplate in the industry. Yet here we are today with General Motors introducing the brand new Oldsmobile Bravada.
Would I buy a Bravada? Not on your Nelly. It's a very nice package, and of the three, it's certainly the most civilized and most car-like. But having said that, why would I buy a nameplate that's about to go down the Swanee? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Should consumers even look at a Bravada?
Sure, why not? Oldsmobile may be dead, but General Motors isn't. And basically, when Mom and Pop are still there, the kids are fine, no matter how many of them are still at home. So sure, Oldsmobile Bravada will offer things to consumers that they won't find in the Trailblazer, and they certainly won't find it in the GMC version either. So sure, there's a market for that vehicle. That vehicle will sell. And just off the record, I wouldn't be surprised to see that vehicle surface as a Buick somewhere down the line too, because Buick division really doesn't have this type of vehicle. And if Oldsmobile's gone, hey, you're leaving home and you're not coming back, why wouldn't you give your luggage to your kid sister?
You're looking at the 2002 Cadillac Escalade. We're talking a 6-liter V8, 345 horsepower with a price tag around $72,000. Now, we all know that Bill Gardner is a big fan of GM trucks, but
ugly is how I describe that Escalade, Brad. And it's not a Chevy truck, even though it shares all the same mechanical parts. Might even be built by the same guys. It's a Cadillac. Billy's over here in the Chevy truck, Cadillac over here. Never the twain shall meet. You'll never see me in an Escalade. Anyhow, what I want to talk about this week is one of my customers' cars, a 1990 Oldsmobile that's right behind me. It's a full-size front-wheel drive car with a 4-speed overdrive automatic transmission. Very low mileage car, but we had to tow this thing in from about 150 miles away from the shop with the transmission burned out. When we got the thing down here and got it apart, we realized that most of the damage was concentrated in one area. The 4th gear clutches were burned up. Now, what had happened was the lady that was operating the car described to me, and she was very clear on this, she remembers not having the shifter fully into overdrive. It was partially between neutral and overdrive. She remembers it clearly, and she described a whining sound during that period of time. Once she figured out what was going on and looked down at the gear shift indicator, pulled it fully into overdrive, the whining ceased, but the next time she came to a stop, the car wouldn't move. Now, when we went to the TSBs, or technical service bulletins, on this particular make and model of transmission, it described this situation to a T and said that with the design of the channel plate, which is a component inside the automatic transmission, it was possible on this make and model of car to have oil pressure directed to 2 areas of the transmission that would actually literally more or less fight against each other in the same fashion that if you were driving your car with your foot on the throttle and your foot on the brakes simultaneously, you're going to burn up your brakes fighting against the engine power. So this is what happened on this car. Now, what this points out is the importance of being very deliberate about the way you operate your car. If she'd had that transmission fully into overdrive, this wouldn't have happened. Now, we had to update the channel plate to a newer design so that this couldn't happen again. But in any case, it was a very expensive repair that you want to try and avoid. Another thing that you want to keep in mind, a lot of cars that I get into these days, I find that the gear shift indicator on the dash is either broken or out of adjustment. So that, for example, when it's in drive, it's showing that it's still in neutral or overdrive. It's out of sync with the shifter. That's very, in many cases, there's just a little skinny cable that can be adjusted underneath the steering column of the car to put that pointer back into proper synchronization. If your car has that situation going on, I suggest that you think about fixing it, or if the little cable's broken, have it repaired or replaced so that it indicates the proper gear position when you're shifted in. And make sure, once again, that you're very deliberate, not harsh or extreme with the way you shift the car, but very deliberate that you get it properly into gear. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2001.
Who do we want to hit? Do we want to hit .com generation kids or people who remember the Mini from Europe because they were over there? But basically, I think what we want to do is bring emotion back into motoring. People look at it, they react to it, positive or negative. But it's a car that, I mean, it stands for fun, dynamic driving.
I got a phone call the other day from my friend Sergeant Cam Woolley of the Ontario Provincial Police. He told me they're about to launch Operation Pullover, targeting Left lane bandits. Well, my heart just about did a handstand. Finally, they're going to do something about this. I'm convinced that people driving in the wrong lane is the worst traffic situation we face. People who drive in the middle lane particularly drive me nuts. I mean, why would you expose yourself from danger from both sides? It's like an army marching down the middle of a valley where you expose both flanks. If you're in the right lane, at least you've got a shoulder you can go to if there's an emergency. Now, some people say, well, in the right lane, if somebody's coming on an on-ramp, I'll have to move to the middle lane anyway. Well, yeah, but what if the next on-ramp is 15 kilometers away? Now, I don't know what it's like in your province, but in Ontario, it is illegal to drive in the right lane unless you're preparing to turn left, which, on a freeway, I hope you're not doing too often, or unless you're passing somebody. Not passing somebody who might be 15 kilometers down the road, passing somebody now. If there's nobody in that right lane and you could be over there, then you have to be over there. If someone does come on an on-ramp, make your signal, move over, let them on, get back, no problem. One of the best things about driving in Europe, apart from the fact you can go a million miles an hour, is the lane discipline. You drive on the right, they pass on the left. It's beautiful. Well, except in England, where they drive on the left and pass on the right. Come to think of it, that's pretty much like Ontario, because I'm the only guy out there, which is another advantage of eliminating left lane banditry. We'd improve the capacity of our highways by about 30%. Now, the police often complain that if they write left lane bandit tickets, the justice of the peace won't convict. But I spoke with the JP the other day. He told me he'd only seen 2 such charges in 15 years on the bench, and he convicted on both of them. Now, Sergeant Woolley assures me they've got the judicial system on board, and I say to the OPP, go get those guys. This program's going on as you hear this. We'll be back in a few weeks to let you know how it all turned out. I'm Jim Kenzie.
We've only spent a brief time in GM's new triplets, the Envoy, Bravada, and Trailblazer, but one thing is for sure, General Motors has some serious product to throw at the competition, that being the Ford Explorer and the Grand Cherokee. And GM believes their brand new 4.2-liter inline-six sets a new benchmark in 6-cylinder powertrains and is convinced it will move them to the front of the line. Graham will tell you what he thinks on a future test drive, and incidentally, we'll also be adding one of these vehicles to our long-term fleet. Well, that's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
People aren't taught how to drive. You're taught how to pass a driver's test, which in no way equips you to go out on the highway and deal with the conditions. You have no idea what to do with the brakes and the steering.
TSN's Motoring 2001 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.